This is exactly what you deserve, trash. Those words hung in the heavy, humid air of the dining room, vibrating in the silence that followed. I stared down at my plate, an exquisite piece of imported bone china rimmed with gold, now defiled. A glob of saliva, frothy and glistening, slowly slid down the rim, mingling with the remnants of truffle risotto. 12 people sat around the long candlelit table. 12 pairs of eyes, ranging from horrified to amused, were fixed on me. At the head of the table sat Genevieve Sterling, the 65-year-old matriarch of one of New Orleans' oldest families. She stood there, chest heaving beneath a silk blouse that cost more than my bakery earned in a month, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin as if she were the one who had been violated. She had just leaned over the centerpiece of white orchids and spat at me. But the spit wasn't what shattered my heart. The spit was just a physical insult, something I could wipe away. What truly broke me, what caused a fissure in my soul that I knew would never fully seal, was the voice that followed. "Mother, please, just sit down. Don't provoke her anymore. You know how she gets." It was the voice of Marcus, my son, my Marcus, the boy I had raised single-handedly in a small, heat-soaked apartment above a jazz club. The boy whose college tuition I had paid for by kneading dough until my knuckles were swollen and my back felt like shattered glass. The man who was now looking at me not with outrage on my behalf, but with annoyance. His eyes begged me to be silent, to swallow this bile, to not ruin his perfect dinner in the Garden District. In that suspended moment, looking at the weak, terrified man my son had become, something inside me didn't break. It calcified. It turned into something cold, hard, and sharp. I reached into my purse with hands that were surprisingly steady. I pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, and typed 3 simple words. "Execute the protocol." Genevieve let out a sharp, cruel laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Who are you texting, Clara? Your little baking club? Are they coming to pick it outside my gate with baguettes?" I stood up slowly. I picked up my napkin and wiped the corner of my mouth, though I hadn't eaten a bite. I spoke with a voice I didn't recognize, a voice stripped of all the warmth and hesitation that had defined me for decades. "No, Genevieve, my attorneys. To understand how a baker ended up sitting at a mahogany table in a mansion worth millions, only to destroy the lives of everyone sitting around it, you have to understand who I was before the war began. My name is Clara Jenkins. I am 58 years old. For most of my life, I was the invisible woman. I was the flour-dusted mother, the silent provider, the woman who shrank herself so her son could grow. I believed that humility was a virtue. I believed that if you gave love freely, it would eventually return to you. I was wrong. 3 years ago, my life was small, contained, and fragrant. I lived in the French Quarter of New Orleans in a narrow shotgun house with a courtyard overflowing with ferns and jasmine. Downstairs was my life's work, a small bakery called the Gilded Crumb. Every morning at 4, while the rest of the city was sleeping off the bourbon from the night before, I was awake. I smelled of yeast, vanilla bean, and chicory coffee. My world was defined by the heat of the ovens and the rhythm of my hands shaping dough. My customers were the locals, the jazz musicians finishing their sets, the hotel workers, the people who paid in crumpled singles and always left with a smile. "Miss Clara," they would say, "your beignets taste like heaven." I didn't have wealth, but I had dignity. and I had Marcus. Marcus was my masterpiece. He studied finance at Tulane, graduating at the top of his class. When he got a job at a prestigious investment firm, I felt a pride so intense it was almost painful. I remembered the nights I stitched his school uniforms because we couldn't afford new ones. I remembered the dinners I skipped so he could have a second portion. I thought he understood the cost of his success. I realized I was mistaken the day he introduced me to Bianca. It was a Sunday in late October. They arrived at the bakery just as I was closing up. "Mom," Marcus said, his smile tight and nervous, "I want you to meet someone." Bianca Sterling was the kind of beautiful that requires maintenance. She was petite, blonde, and dressed in a white sundress that remained miraculously spotless in the city grime. She looked at my flour-stained apron and messy bun with a gaze that was polite but distant, like a tourist looking at an interesting but slightly dirty exhibit. "Charmed, Mrs. Jenkins," she said, extending a hand that felt like cold marble. "Welcome, dear," I said, wiping my hands on a towel before taking hers. "Would you like a coffee? A fresh pastry?" Bianca looked at Marcus with a quick, darting glance. "Oh, no, thank you. My nutritionist advises against gluten and refined sugar. But it smells very rustic in here." Rustic, a polite word for poor. We went upstairs to my small living room. I served coffee in my mismatched ceramic mugs. Bianca held hers by the very rim. "Mom," Marcus said, reaching for Bianca's free hand, "we have news. We're getting married." The joy I should have felt was immediately tempered by a cold knot in my stomach. "That's wonderful news," I managed. "Bianca, welcome to the family." "Thank you," Bianca said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Marcus has told me so much about your little shop. It's so quaint that you still work with your hands." "I'm a baker," I said, straightening my back. "It's an honest trade." "Of course," Bianca replied smoothly. "It's very noble." 2 weeks later came the invitation to meet the Sterlings. Their estate was deep in the Garden District, a massive antebellum mansion surrounded by ancient oaks and wrought iron fences. It was a place that screamed exclusion. I arrived carrying a box of my signature lemon tarts, a recipe that had won local awards. The butler who opened the door looked at me as if I were a delivery driver. "Service entrance is around the back," he drawled. "I'm Marcus's mother," I said, clutching the box. He led me through a hallway lined with portraits of ancestors who looked down with judgment. We emerged onto a back patio larger than my entire house. Genevieve Sterling sat in the center, a woman who wore her arrogance like a crown. Next to her was her husband, Richard, a man with a red face and a glass of scotch that never seemed to empty. "This is my mother, Clara," Marcus said, jumping up. Genevieve didn't stand. She lowered her sunglasses and inspected me from shoes to hair. "Charmin'," she said flatly. "Sit." "I brought dessert," I offered, holding out the pink box. "Lemon tarts with a lavender crust." Genevieve gestured to a maid. "Odette, take that to the kitchen. We'll see if the staff wants it. We have a chef preparing creme brulee." My tarts disappeared, never to be seen again. For the next 2 hours, I was a ghost. They talked about summer homes in the Hamptons, yachting trips to the Mediterranean, people I didn't know. Whenever I tried to speak, Genevieve would smile condescendingly and change the subject. When I finally left, Genevieve offered me a cheek that felt like dry parchment. "You know, Clara," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "it's so refreshing that Marcus has such humble roots. It keeps him grounded. It's almost like a charity project for us. The wedding was a blur of excess. I wore a navy blue dress I'd saved for 6 months to buy. Surrounded by designer gowns and diamonds, I looked like the help. I was seated at table 19, near the kitchen doors, with a deaf elderly aunt and 2 cousins who spent the entire meal texting. When Marcus finally danced with me, he was stiff. "Thank you for everything, Mom," he recited as if reading from a script. "I love you, Marcus," I whispered. "I know." Not "I love you too," just "I know." Months passed. Marcus and Bianca moved into a renovated townhouse, a gift from Richard and Genevieve. I stayed in the quarter, kneading my dough, waiting for phone calls that became shorter and less frequent. Then came the news. Bianca was pregnant. I was going to be a grandmother. I immediately started knitting. I bought the softest yellow wool and spent my evenings creating a blanket, stitching love into every loop. When baby Leo was born, Marcus called me from the hospital. "He's here, Mom. Leo Sterling Jenkins." Sterling Jenkins. The mother's name first, a power move. "Can I come see him?" I asked, weeping with happiness. "Tomorrow. Bianca's tired, and Genevieve is here managing the doctors." When I arrived the next day, clutching my yellow blanket and a teddy bear, the room was full of balloons and flowers. Genevieve was holding the baby. "Clara, wash your hands before you come any closer. Hospitals are full of germs." I scrubbed my hands until they were raw. "Can I hold him?" Bianca looked at Genevieve. Genevieve gave a barely perceptible nod. Briefly, "He needs to feed soon." I held Leo. He was warm, heavy, and perfect. I pulled out the blanket. "I made this for him," I said softly. Genevieve reached out and touched the wool with 2 fingers. "Wool? Oh, Clara, we can't use this. It scratches and fibers can be inhaled. We only use organic hypoallergenic bamboo cotton for Leo." She took the blanket from me and placed it on a chair buried under a pile of magazines. It was never used. Over the next year, I became the second-class grandmother. I saw photos on social media of Leo's first birthday party, a lavish affair with ponies and clowns, to which I was invited only as an afterthought. I arrived to find there was no seat assigned to me at the family table. I stood in the back eating cake off a paper napkin while Genevieve held court. I began to wither. Then came the turning point. It didn't come with a bang, but with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is Marcus Thorne, attorney at law." I froze. "Is Marcus okay?" "He's fine. I'm contacting you regarding the estate of your late ex-husband, Daniel Jenkins." Daniel, the man who had walked out on us when Marcus was 3. I hadn't heard his name in decades. "Daniel passed away 6 months ago in Houston," Mr. Thorne said. "He did quite well for himself in the shipping industry. He left a substantial trust." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up. "He left me nothing when he was alive. He left the entire estate to Marcus, but there's a stipulation. A letter of intent was attached to the will. Daniel wanted to make amends. He instructed Marcus that a portion of the funds, specifically a monthly stipend and a lump sum for your retirement, was to be given to you. He wanted to ensure the woman who raised his son was cared for." I sat down heavily on a sack of flour. "How much?" "The total estate is valued at roughly $6 million. The room spun. "And Marcus knows?" Mr. Thorne paused. "That's why I'm calling you, Mrs. Jenkins. Marcus executed the transfer of funds into his own accounts 5 months ago. He signed an affidavit stating he would inform you and manage the distribution." I've tried to follow up, but he's blocked my calls. I did some digging, and I have reason to believe you haven't received a dime. Not a dime. My son, who knew I was still working 12-hour days with arthritis in my hands, had inherited millions and hidden it from me. Why are you telling me this now? I whispered. Because I liked Daniel in his later years. He regretted leaving you, and because I detest greed. Legally, Marcus has the money, but the moral claim, the fraud in the affidavit, that gives us leverage. I went to Marcus's house the next day. He opened the door looking annoyed. Mom, you should have called. We're busy preparing for a gala. We need to talk, Marcus, about Daniel. His face went the color of ash. He ushered me inside quickly, looking around to see if the neighbors were watching. We stood in his foyer under a crystal chandelier. You know, he said, his voice trembling, I know about the money. I know about the letter. Why, Marcus? Mom, listen. It's complicated. Daniel abandoned us. We owe him nothing. I invested that money. I put it into Richard's company. It's growing. It's for Leo's future. And what about my present? I asked. What about the fact that he specifically asked you to care for me? We were going to, Marcus insisted. We were going to buy you a condo eventually, but right now we need liquidity. Richard's business is going through a cash flow issue. We needed the capital to secure our position. You gave my money to Richard Sterling? It's an investment. And listen, Mom, since you're here. He ran to a side table and grabbed a folder. Genevieve and Bianca wanted me to give you this. I opened the folder. It was a legal document, voluntary relinquishment of grandparental rights. What is this? It's just a formality, Marcus said, sweating now. With a new baby coming? New baby? He flinched. Yes, Bianca's pregnant again, a girl. Look, Genevieve feels that your lifestyle and your resentment are toxic for the children. If you sign this, we can set up a supervised visit once a month, and maybe in a few years, we can discuss the money. I looked at my son. I looked at the signature line waiting for my name. They wanted to buy my disappearance with my own stolen money. I won't sign this, Marcus. Mom, please. If you don't sign it, Genevieve is going to sue for full restrictive custody. She has lawyers you can't imagine. She'll paint you as unstable, poor, senile. Just sign it. I dropped the folder on the floor. I looked him in the eye. I am not signing. Get out, he hissed. If you want to play hardball, you're going to lose. You're a baker. We're the Sterlings. I left and went straight to Marcus Thorne's office. We have a lot of work to do, I told him. For the next 3 weeks, I was a spy in my own life. Marcus hired a forensic accountant. We dug into Richard Sterling's cash flow issues. What we found wasn't just a cash flow issue. It was a Ponzi scheme. Richard had been using new investor money to pay off debts for years. Marcus's inheritance, my $6 million, had been dumped into a sinking ship to keep the Sterling lifestyle afloat for just a few more months. But I needed more than just financial proof. I needed to expose their character. I reached out to Odette, the maid who had taken my tarts that first day. I met her at a coffee shop far from the Garden District. Why would you help me? I asked her. Because Mrs. Genevieve treats us like dogs, Odette said, sipping her tea. And because I saw how she treated you, no mother deserves that. She handed me a small USB drive. I put a recorder in the parlor, she whispered. They talk when they think no one is listening. I listened to the recording that night. It was Genevieve's voice, clear and sharp. We need to make sure Clara's declared unfit before the baby's born. We can use her poverty against her. Say her house is unsanitary. Marcus is on board. He's weak, but he's greedy. He knows if Clara gets the money, our ship sinks. I had the smoking gun. Then came the invitation to dinner. A reconciliation dinner, according to Marcus's text. A chance to move forward. I knew what it was. It was an ambush to bully me into signing the papers. I accepted. I spent the last of my savings on a dress, not navy blue, but emerald green silk. I had my hair done. I put on makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, a warrior. I arrived at the mansion. The atmosphere was tense. They seated me at the end of the table again. The conversation was pointed, filled with barbs about my struggling business and my lonely life. Then came the moment. The main course was cleared. Genevieve stood up to make a toast. To family, she said, raising her glass, and to knowing one's place. She looked at me. Clara, darling, we have the papers ready in the study. We expect you to sign them before dessert. It's for the best. You really aren't equipped to be part of this dynasty. I looked up. I'm not signing anything, Genevieve. And as for your dynasty, it's built on sand. The table went silent. Genevieve's face turned purple. How dare you, you ungrateful little peasant? You should be on your knees thanking us for letting you breathe our air. She leaned over, gathered the saliva in her mouth, a grotesque display of hatred, and spat. It landed on my plate right next to the crystal glass. This is exactly what you deserve, trash, she hissed. And then Marcus spoke his fatal words. Mom, please behave. I sent the text. Execute the protocol. My attorneys, I said calmly. Genevieve laughed. You can't afford a lawyer. I can afford the best lawyers in the state, Genevieve, because unlike you, I am not bankrupt. The color drained from Richard Sterling's face. What did you say? The doorbell rang. Odette opened it. Marcus Thorne walked in, followed by 2 federal agents and a process server. Good evening, Marcus said, his voice booming. I have a warrant for the seizure of financial records regarding the Sterling Investment Group, and I have a civil lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and emotional distress on behalf of Mrs. Clara Jenkins. Richard stood up, knocking over his chair. This is preposterous. Is it? Marcus threw a file on the table. We have the bank transfers, Richard. We know you took Marcus's $6 million inheritance, money that legally belonged to the Jenkins estate, and used it to pay off your gambling debts and the mortgage on this house. My son looked at Richard. You said it was an investment. You said the money was safe. Richard didn't answer. He was looking at the federal agents. And you? Marcus Thorne turned to Genevieve. We have a recording of you conspiring to fabricate evidence against a grandmother to deny her visitation rights. In the state of Louisiana, that's a serious offense. The recording played. Genevieve's voice filled the room, cruel and calculating. Bianca gasped. Mom, is that true? Genevieve sank into her chair. She looked suddenly old, her skin sagging, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. I stood up. I walked over to my son. He was weeping, his head in his hands. You chose them, Marcus. You chose the illusion of wealth over your own mother. You stole from me not just money, but trust. Mom, I didn't know Richard was stealing it. I just wanted to belong. You belong nowhere now, I said softly. I turned to Genevieve. She looked up at me, terrified. You spat on my plate, Genevieve. You called me trash. But looking around this table, Seeing the lies, the theft, the cruelty, I think we both know who the trash really is. I walked out of the mansion. The heavy oak doors closed behind me with a final resounding thud. I stood on the porch and took a deep breath of the night air. It smelled of jasmine and rain. It smelled of freedom. The fallout was swift and brutal. The Sterling Empire collapsed within days. Richard was arrested for securities fraud. The mansion was seized by the bank. The news was everywhere. High society fraud, the headlines screamed. Genevieve was ruined. Her friends, the ladies who lunched the charity boards, abandoned her instantly. She was left with nothing but her arrogance, which holds no value in the pawn shop of life. Marcus lost everything. The money was gone. His job fired him to distance themselves from the scandal. He and Bianca were evicted from the townhouse. For months, I didn't hear from them. I focused on my bakery. I used the retirement settlement Marcus Thorne managed to claw back from the remaining assets to renovate the Gilded Crumb. It became a sanctuary. 6 months later, I found Genevieve. I was walking through the French market buying strawberries. I saw a woman working at a tourist stall selling cheap plastic Mardi Gras beads. She wore a simple uniform. Her hair was gray, the dye having grown out long ago. It was Genevieve. She saw me. She didn't sneer. She didn't look away. She looked down at her hands. I walked over. "Hello, Genevieve." She flinched. "Clara, are you here to gloat?" "No," I said. "I'm here to buy some beads." She looked up, confused. "Why?" "Because everyone has to make a living," I said. I bought a strand of purple beads. I paid her and left a $20 tip. "Keep the change," I said. She looked at the money, then at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the end of the hate. Hate is too heavy a burden to carry when you have dough to knead. Marcus came to me a year later. He walked into the bakery, thin, tired, wearing cheap clothes. He stood in line like a customer. When he got to the counter, he didn't ask for money, he didn't ask for help. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. I looked at him. The arrogance was gone. The sterling Polish had rubbed off, leaving the boy I used to know. "I know," I said. Can I see you sometimes? I don't expect anything. I miss you." I handed him a warm beignet. "Start by sweeping the floor," I said. "Then we'll talk." He grabbed the broom. "Today my life is full. The bakery is thriving. Marcus works with me now. He handles the books, honestly this time, and helps with the deliveries. Bianca left him, unable to cope with the poverty. But she brings Leo and the new baby, Chloe, to visit on weekends. She's humbled, quiet, grateful for the free pastries I give the children. I look at Leo, his face covered in powdered sugar, and I smile. I learned a powerful lesson that night at the mahogany table. Dignity is not something people give you. It is something you forge. You cannot demand respect if you're willing to accept crumbs. I stopped accepting crumbs, and in doing so, I built a banquet of my own. We must teach our children that character is the only currency that doesn't devalue. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their own actions. It broke my heart to watch my son fall, but it was the only way he could learn to stand on his own 2 feet. So if you ever feel invisible, if you ever feel like the world is spitting on your plate, remember Clara Jenkins. Wipe your face, stand up, and execute your protocol. Because the best revenge is not destruction. It is thriving in the face of those who wish to see you fail. Never forget your worth. If you like my story, subscribe to Granny Life Lessons.